we're both interested in like getting a surface to appear in our work and trying to build depth and layers and all that. So I'm going to start with some bisqueware that I brought along and start to get some paintings to happen. I'm always like on the line between like, am I painting or decorating? So sometimes I feel like if I find a familiar rhythm, I'm decorating, but then if I'm trying to search, pick out a composition, it turns into a painting. So on my better days, I feel like I'm painting, and on my lazy days, I'm decorating. I'm going to try to find a painting today. But so this is what I'm going to work from, and you'll see that there'll be like 300% more glaze applied than ends up on the piece. It's kind of a redundant process for me. So just so you know what I'm aiming at, this is sort of where I'll be going.
I'm going to be doing, I guess what I'm doing is I'm going to be tuning two of my approaches to the surface. One is painting with underglazes, and then the other one is painting with wax resist. I guess I'm going to show you, I'm going to go ahead and show you how I make my wax because it's very specific. Did I show you this already? You've already been like, this. So those are the two things. And I'm firing in a big wood kiln, so I get a lot of, I used to think that I didn't want to depend on the magic of the kiln, but I really do in the end. I really do love the unique sort of finishing of the pots in the wood kiln. And that was a recent sort of realization that I'm fine with wood kiln, but I do apply a lot of the surface, and I want it to be really, I want it to be exciting to me in this kind of mundane state of bisqueware. I really want it to be really almost like a print or a plate that I'm going to print on a press, which I really like the way Stephen works because he really works the surface in that state and enjoys that pre-fired state pot as much. Somebody told me once that my pots was better before I fired them. When it's true, I think about it, it's like a haunting sound when I unload my kiln. What happened to this one? It didn't quite come out. But then there's also the pots, most of the pots I think, have been experienced of firing and come out in ways I wouldn't have imagined. So it's kind of it's nice. Anyway, I'm going to mix up this, I'm just going to mix up this wax. I guess I'll do that first. So, I can bring the pot over and grab one real quick. I'll show you.
Dumping a bunch of glaze in here. I like to have, I use just a really tight palette of glaze. It's just a white, a green, a yellow, and a clear, and then black that gets added later on. But I always have multiple viscosities of the glaze, so like from finger painting kind of sludge to about as watery as I can get away with, and then a little painting mix in between. So when I'm working a brush, I like it to be sort of right in a creamy stage. The black ends up feeling like chocolate pudding, and down to absolute wash that's almost not glaze at all.
Not paprika. This is red iron oxide. This is black iron oxide. That's for what I do. My recipe is not exact, but it's mostly iron. There's a smidgen of cobalt and manganese, and mostly because I wanted to get a real flat contrast to the kind of gray and white slip. This one's really shiny and salty, but it has a reddish tone to it from the iron. And I used to use like this equal parts. Someone told me back in college to get black, just put all the oxides together and you can really
heavy metal.
Yeah, and it's really, maybe it's Don White's recipe or something like that. But I realized that I don't really need to have so much cobalt, so much manganese. They're very powerful colorants when they're with iron. So I end up using mostly iron oxide, and I put a little bit of cobalt and manganese, and I also put a little bit of frit. Just to help it. So what I'm doing here, what my intention is to have a very graphic pattern, and the clay is dark, it's brown, but it's not it's not like it wouldn't if I just painted this with regular wax and then put it in the wood kiln and use salt to glaze the pot. It would come out kind of brown. I don't have an example. It would come out this color, clay color. Right? So my intention was to figure out a way I can do a really graphic black pattern in one brush stroke with the wax. And it came from this love of this pottery out in California called it's not Santa Monica. It's Malibu Potteries. They were pottery back in the 20s, I believe. And they did this oriental rug patterns on tiles. Really beautiful. And they would do this wax on a flat surface. They would make these beautiful paisley patterns and whatnot on the tiles, and they would color. They would use these little slip or glaze in an ear ball. They would just fill in these areas that were surrounded by wax. So the wax in the firing would come out. It would have this like kind of slight sheen to it, but really was the color glazes were separated completely, so they wouldn't overlap. And I think I saw a tile somewhere. I think it was Garden of the Gods or somewhere out west in a gift shop. I was like, that's a really nice technique, and that sort of started. I mean, I got this book, and anyway, so that was the inspiration for me. That gift shop tile of a bear, a grizzly bear, or something like that. But it was the book is American Potteries. Yeah, and it's a paperback, big paperback book, floppy kind of book with wonderful pictures. And, so I tried chainsaw oil. I tried all different kind of oil because the technique in the book they said it was cuerda seca, which is some sort of oil or resist type of medium, and then they put colorants in that. So I tried all different things and experimented. And I didn't really. And I came to find that the wax, just the regular wax resist that I bought from the store, and I mixed it. And I literally did mix wax with dry powder and it turned into this little chunky mess which I couldn't brush. So I'm not sure what I realized, but I realized that I needed to add water to the material that oxides, so they would be wetted, saturated, and I had that to the wax. So the wax would be absorbed or encapsulate the oxides. I don't have a toothpick holder, but I'll do stuff.
So you're painting with wet wax oxides?
I'm painting with wax with oxides mixed into it. I can use this perfectly blue eraser. I usually have a popsicle stick handy. I don't know why. I'll use one popsicle stick. My kids do like craft projects. Kobo crafts. It's a little water here, but basically what I want to do is I want to make like a paste that's very similar to wasabi. When you go to get sushi, you get this little wasabi doll on your plate. That's exactly what I want to do. I hope I didn't mix too much water. You don't get that.
I should have WD-40'd my squirt gun. Familiar squeak to me, but I don't want to squeak over Michael too much.
I need a squeak.
So I'm just going to lay, we've got some camouflage going on in here. That wax will be painted on top of to get some articulated cells. And then on this one here, I'm just going to put kind of like a groundwork of black. So it's put on and taken away. And this is going to become a familiar process, and this is going to become a familiar squeak. I always lose my tools, whether it's a metal rib which is hard to find, or a nice spray master like this, but I'm always walking around the studio going, well, it's sort of like easy atmosphere, like cold atmosphere. So I grew up firing wood kilns and salt kilns, and I like the depth of that. I love, how that skin gets laid on there, and how there's like that sort of, you get that sense of water going in there. And once I got tired of stoking the kiln and chopping wood, I found that like if I was after water, like really the best thing to use was water. So it seems to work for me. So that black will just end up catching the areas that I wanted to, all the lines that are in the form, it'll kind of fold into, and then there'll be this notion of kind of like a residual memory happening in there. And just starting to look at like what's already on there, and like that red clay, white slip on top of that, and then some finger marks that are in there. The black will catch that. I'm going to try to keep this little lattice work fairly clean and start to have it trace, but then color will be added on top of that, responding to it. It seems like a silly process to be putting things on and taking them off. We had to impersonate each other in graduate school, and the woman who decided to be me for the day just made it sound so silly. Put things on and take things off, and put things on and take things off. It's a little neurotic.
You try and keep it in one direction to get a wash and go in one direction.
I mean, so the way that this was slipped was being held from here, and so I have that direction going. It's going to be sort of like a horizontal. For sure, I don't think I'll confuse it. So it's sort of about getting things saturated, and at a certain point, when the clay is not thirsty anymore, it'll just sort of begin to slide like that. That's rich.
See this stuff? Can you see this stuff? No, it's not really us, so I'm spilling. It's really getting absorbing the water. This oxide mixture. Somebody once called it poison paste, but since this doesn't have, it just has iron in it, probably not that poison. But if you ate this, it probably would affect you. Anything of this quantity of this, I wouldn't call it nutritionally rich in iron. It's not something you want to eat. So the idea is that my idea is that I have this wax and I have this colorant. Together, it's going to be a one-stroke kind of thing. When it's over, I can't add more to it, and I can't build up the surface. So there's a sliding scale of wax resist effect and colorant effect. And I'm sort of trying to meet it in the middle. So I have good rich color. I also have good wax resist. When I dip the pots and slip, the reports slip on. And so if you use too much colorant, you have less wax resist effect, and it doesn't resist, and you have to dab it and spray it. I use a spray bottle head. And if you have too much wax, you have a watery kind of effect of the oxide, which is fine too. I mean, I'm trying to meet it somewhere in the middle. So this is probably good. And I literally have a little jar that I keep this stuff in, a lid jar. I add a little water to it, and I take a little popsicle stick and add about this much. A little jar. This is a jar. Does anybody recognize this label? I don't think people from around here. No.
So Michael, you don't have a. Oh, sorry. You don't have a. You don't have a weighed recipe for the oxide to a volume of the wax.
Not really.
God, that's just so like me. I would not do that.
It's about that much.
But yeah, that's what I'm talking about. They make.
I hope it works. I don't know. I mean, I'm not in my own turf, so it's a little bit different. This maybe I should do this much. I'm going to go through this. But yeah.
I do the same.
I wrote it down. It's like I wrote down the popsicle stick that I used, and I did that. Originally, I did that. Like, well, this is how much I used, and sort of, and I think with equal parts, all these oxides, and an equal part of frit or feldspar, or borax, whatever I was using, something. And I didn't explain that why I wanted to put a little melting in there, because sometimes in my kiln in the back there are spots that don't get a lot of salt, and I want to make sure that that oxide layer is really has some melting, some fluxing, a chance to flux there, so that the salt's not hitting. So that's why that's a theory, but it's all theory. I don't really know. And we were talking the other night about mythology, ceramic mythology. Like, well, you have to use this fan to burn this kiln. And when somebody comes along and doesn't use the fan, it's like the life of Ron. Everybody's takes her shoe off when he loses his sandal. So we just kind of follow like a herd without thinking. And that's what we've been taught. And then, so I just do it this way, and it seems to work fine. We'll see. So this is the wax. This is not what I use, but it looks similar. It's like it might be a different formula wax, but it's wax resist. Smells like latex almost. It's latex. It smells trouble. It's latex. Anyway. The reason I'm using a small container is the best way to mix this, the easiest way, and it's this lid fits tightly. I have a small. I have a small. I've been using it for 10 years now. When I taught at Penland, they had these little something scientific company, little plastic lab sample jars. They have a little screw top lid, and they're small. You can different sizes like this. Yeah, plastic, but it's this size. And this size will last me when I'm painting. I sit down and paint maybe for 3 days before I load the kiln. It should be 6 days, but I'm usually painting day and night. But this will last me maybe a day. I'll reload it the next day, or whenever it starts getting down. And also, the other advantage of having a small container like this is you're not dipping your brush. This is how I travel with my brushes. These are all my little precious brushes. I don't take that good care of them, but they're really holding them. And this is, I guess they make brush carriers that are more professional than this, but this seems to really work. Velvet corrugated is the best. I didn't have any around this quickly. So anyway, these are my brushes. And the other thing about this container is that, I'm not dipping into a big pot every few brush strokes. I'm dipping into a small dish or a small jar that's easy to access. Also, with wax, it tends to, over a day's time, it tends to dry. And so you get this real messy, kind of drippy wax, because I tend to point my brush a lot, like this, pointing it to get the right tip. And all that stuff runs down the side, and over 8 or 10 hours of painting, it kind of dries. So there's an advantage of using a small jar like this versus a big jar or bucket. It's very important. So write that down. And then you put outcast or something. Just shake it off. What picture you have. And it's getting black. I usually have music playing. Hit it. This is really black. This is going to be. It might not work. It may be too much black. What are you going for? If you say it's too black. It's really black. I think that is black iron oxide. There's a lot of black iron oxide. I'm not used to this color. It's usually redder. It's mostly red iron, but I'm just going to have to do that. But see, it's half black iron and half red iron. It looks like it's nice and rich.
All yours are glazes.
Yep, everything's in glaze. The black is a little bit versatile. It needs to put on a wheel, it needs it on leather hard, on this, over glaze, and under glaze. The rest is all a single phase. It's very simple. Frit glaze, 80% frit, a little bit of clay, a little bit of silica. They seem to work together because I'm bumping them up against each other constantly. It's just the same formula. The green has a little copper, the yellow has a little bit of iron, and the white so it passes up in certain paths. So it's I like to get a couple of boards of pots going at one time while I'm glazing. It's kind of moving back and forth, having one feed into the other, and then with all this water business, like the wax certainly has to be put on top of the glaze when it's dry, and then set up, because I'm going to kind of use it a little bit. I'm going to be spraying after the glaze once it's on top of after the wax once it's on top of the glaze. So timing ends up being the key issue. With this fella here, so it's just finger painting, which is sort of my new sophisticated technique. I've got dots of the green glaze going, and then wax on top of that, and then shooting off of that, just wax dots on top of the bisque. So that'll be kind of bare clay. That'll be like 50% paper. And I'm going to be building yellow dots on top of that. So I'm getting interested in sort of like an offset. So now that that green is protected, I'll go back into a little finger paint and touch So it'll be green, haloed by yellow, and then traced by black.
The other mundane fact about this paste stuff, if it dries, it doesn't matter, you just add a little water to it and you're back to, it doesn't require to be airtight. But the wax has to be sealed over. If it starts drying, you have to scrape it out. I guess another mundane fact is that these brushes are, this is a really expensive brush. I've used this for years and I've painted millions of leaves with it. But some of these brushes are pretty cheap, but I still try to take care of them because I get attached to a certain brush. This has been my favorite brush. It's probably got another firing left in it. It's probably going to, hairs are starting to come out of it. But to protect the brushes from the wax, somebody once told me to dip it in soap, like liquid soap, which I did. But I don't know if it really, maybe another myth. Maybe it makes them the brushes last longer, but I hadn't really noticed it. So I ran out of this really great soap that I like to smell it a lot, and I just couldn't find it again, so I stopped using the soap. I didn't like the scent. Anyway, I found it's probably okay not to use the soap, but if you want to use wax with your brushes and reclaim the brushes after your painting, it's good to be attentive to them. If the brush is real small and thin, like this wispy little brush, this tip will dry like within a few minutes. So my solution to that is to have a tub of water near where I'm painting, and when I'm going to a more liner brush like this, I put my other brush down on the table like this, or I put it into a tub of water when I go down to lunch or whatever, just to keep the brush wet and I'm not letting it dry out. The smaller the brush, the faster, the less mass of the brush, the faster it's going to dry and get stiff. And its suppleness is really important for me. This brush can get really kind of, it's not dry, but it's not moving right, so I have to keep it, I have to attend to it. So that's the brush talk, the brush maintenance thing. And sometimes if you let a brush dry out well, you just put it in hot water and let it soak, and generally it comes back. So lately, I want to show a few pots. This pot is, I'm not going to do this. This is called combing. It's like my latest thing that I've been doing, and I wish I could just do it all day long. I just really love the finger painting, like Stephen said. Speaking of fingers, if you were like elementary kids, you'd probably ask me what happened to your finger. Maybe you know already, but I had an accident a few years ago on a table saw. So, but I never exploited that fact. I don't really like, this is, I'm not obsessed about it that way. I mean, I tried a few things. I tried poking pots and doing things like that, but it didn't. Anyway, recently, like the last couple of years, I guess, I've been really fascinated by the patterns I can create with this combing. It's basically, it goes on the leather hard pot, and then, it's a tile 6 slip recipe. And I have my recipes in my book. I'll give them to you, but they're nothing special. I've got from other people and modified them. But this is basically tile 6 slip, which is really nice and creamy on the leather hard clay, and I just kind of comb it until I feel like the pattern is interesting to me. And you can comb over and over and over and over. And it stays wet for a while, so the tile 6 is sort of it holds a lot of moist water, so it's a fun thing. I find it when I teach, I try. It's a hard thing to teach, but how can you recognize when you enjoy something? That's probably the very top of my list. If you can find out what that is or recognize, it's tough to recognize because we were talking yesterday in the seminar about how do you get all this other crap out of the way and be sensitive enough to to recognize when you're really enjoying something, when you're really into it. When time goes by and you go, oh shit, midnight. And I just haven't been thinking about what I'm supposed to be doing or what I should do, but just doing something that you really enjoy. So this is what I really enjoy, and I can lose hours playing with one pot. But for me, I have this following of people who like to have the pattern pots, which I'm going to show you. I will. happy with that pot. So this is like a vestigial pattern of like, okay, it's not enough to sign. I didn't sign it. Oh, I did sign it.
Maybe the color separation.
Well, this is the gray part is the clay. The dark lines are the clay, and the light parts are the slip. Sometimes they're even more. This is the commercial clay. This is the same thing. It's just coming straight up and down. These both have a clear glaze, so it's like a moss salt glaze, really thin, clear clay that is going to splash on. Can you see? Pass it around. So,
what I've got going on inside of this guy, so on top of that camouflage, it's going to be hard to see from the distance, but there's some flowers painted on there, and that's what I'm going to be playing around with this picture here. So that's the red is going to be yellow, the green is going to be the brighter green, and the rest is filled in with the clear. And so those flowers are kind of playing with that camouflage, and all the glaze is going to be removed in there except for where the wax was just added. So, like I said, 90% of the glaze that I just brushed on will be removed. Same idea here. Oh, please. So the flower, it sort of looks like a stencil to everybody, especially since it ends up being traced and articulated by black, but it's just a brush stroke at a time. So just laying this little old wax brush that makes a dewdrop. Those to happen. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not. You know, like it's a stencil, probably be a lot more reliable. I found that mobile Sur A is a really good wax. It just seems to hold up because of the abuse I put it through. Anything that's sort of plasticky ends up peeling, and then the sort of typical like Mile High is my distributor in Colorado, like their sort of gallon of wax just doesn't hold up at all. It'll get eaten up by the water. This dries nice and hard and quick. So it's a favorite of mine. This Michael Simon that I saw use it many years ago.
I think it's interesting that both we qualify certain brush marks better than others. And I do the same thing. I mean, that was a good one. Oh, that was not so good. And it's like the pursuit of that really fresh mark. It's what really keeps me. I mean, really keeps me going. I mean, from pot to pot, or within the pot. I like leaves. I mean, I must have painted, I don't know, uncountable. That same mark, just that quick, lively. It's always that pursuit of that mark that's really kind of not like the marks I'm about to make, which are very self-conscious in front of people. That mark, I forget what I'm doing, just kind of rhythmically, I'm really in tune with the surface of the pot, almost as if I'm a tiny little person walking along that, and just kind of pulling the brush stroke across the pot. You know, it's this kind of mental thing where I'm like really hyper-focused on each mark. But at the same time, the paradox is I'm not trying to think about it too much, or talk about it too much.
Question, actually this would be for question for both of you. Do you start with the design idea and then think of the pot shape to put it on? Or do you start with the pot and then try to find the design?
You know, my pots, I'm trying to keep it pretty straightforward. We're both, we make round pots. You know, I don't consider myself having invented any of these forms. They're pretty straightforward. So then it's just a matter of dressing them up. I think what I do end up responding to is whatever's happened after the bisque and the glaze process, you know, with the white slip added up, whether I'm kind of pulling back through it or leaving just sort of like that moody wash that's going to be on there from the clay opening up. And I'll do the same thing with the slip where I'll put the slip on and then spray it down real fast so that it starts to move. But so it's mostly, it's responding to surface and dressing up a you know, pretty standard pot. Yeah.
One of the things I consciously try to do is when I'm throwing, is really set those little thin, those little marks, almost like Stephen's going on. I have trouble painting that the way I want to paint it because I want to go and have a continuous line. So I try to do that when I'm throwing. I try to have a clean surface. It doesn't mean I don't have to scrape the slurry off the pot. That's not necessary, but as a matter of layback, I'm trying to leave more softness in the surface, but I really don't want to too much throwing lines, which takes a conscious effort when you're in the first couple pulls, really. If you're not digging too deeply, or if you want to do that. But the shapes I tend to, last few years I've gravitated towards these more round forms because they really, these patterns I like to use are kind of ordered patterns, or scrolls basically. And then that's the backbone of the pattern, and then it's filled in with all these fun stuff, squiggles and dots and birds and whatever I put in there. But I find that shape, the round shape, really makes that scrolling, it gives it like an exponential effect. And so my patterns I'm trying to do aren't not based on reality. I'm not painting, like I'm not out looking at shrubberies or trees, but I did start that way. I mean, just a minute, I did look out the window one day, and that was my first pot, and I was like, I'm going to try to paint this beautiful tree, and I reacted to this beautiful beech tree in the wintertime through a window in my studio, and these leaves were just flopping in the wind. It was really, I was taken by it, so I said, I'm going to literally try to paint this branch. I really painted it, and I still have a picture of that pot, but now I've come to a very different place where I just really want to create that same feeling of where, you see a really beautiful sky, clouds, trees, or you have this moment where the sort of puts your breath, and I want my pots to sort of have that effect when people see it, like a dazzling, almost like a, you're not hypnotized, but you see it, you're like struck by it. And I find that looking at metalwork and historical, arts and crafts and things that are based on nature, it's that filigree, that really intensity of pattern that gives you that feeling of excitement. So the round pots are what and it's ironic, when I moved to North Carolina, I was taken by the sort of southeastern stoneware pottery that was in that area, and I really loved those pots, those big round jugs and jars. It's really a perfect match for my patterns. I find some pots I'm making now, they don't work with the scroll, so I have a different approach to this. I found the stool I use is from this furniture store nearby, and it's a bar stool that has a spinning top. I really like it. I kind of do this and I'm doing that. But really, holding the pot, especially larger pot, I really feel like it's all about distance. I'm holding the pot, familiarity with the, when you're laying down a brush or a pencil or whatever it is, you've got this kind of, have a foothold or like your hand, you have your hand down and running. Same with the pot, I sort of have to hold in a certain way and see what it's all about to sort of holding it like a violin,
Yes, please.
On the dots that you put on, and then you put the wax on, and then the other glaze on top, do you do anything like wash off the glaze that went on the wax, right? I mean, you're just going to rely on squirting. Right. Yep. But I didn't see you putting wax on top of the second glaze.
On top of the red, yeah, real fast, like right away.
Oh, right away.
Yep. Yep. And this is where, the sort of deciding what mood the pot's going to have is sort of, it ends up just being like, how much black do I take off? Like, how much of it is space and how much of it is this sort of, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, no, please. Get over here. So, the whole reduction process began by trying to get an articulated flower in green to be traced by black, and trying to get all the black away from it except that. And then over the course of like, you know, various levels of success of that, like I came to really enjoy the haphazardness of it, how like the process really dictates where the black is left and where it's not. So this is really like, you know, the composing part. I kind of get after it and like, do I want to get this little dip of yellow in here to have like just a single tight line? And if I do, I kind of get in there and just squirt that black away so that it scoops right around there, maybe like a little bit longer on the bottom. So it's like really loving how glazed material works in the kiln, the whole notion of heat and gravity, but then kind of bowing it, you know.
You said you fired cone 10?
No, I fire right between cone 0, 1, and 1. There should be a cone 0. I'm working on that one.
One of the things about my process in the kiln, what happens is, which happened not by intention, but it just happened by accident. I really love these very fine lines I can get with the brush tip, and but it doesn't leave very much room for slip. After I dip this pot in the slip, it doesn't leave a lot of room for that slip to resist off. Like there's like a broad area like this leaf, there's a room for the slip to run back to the edge. And, there's no room physically for the slip to move off this really thin line, but what happens in my process is that the slip is going on bisqueware. The slip hasn't been, there's no calcined materials, it's all plastic. Well, it's 49% EPK, and the rest is made up with feldspar and silica, so it actually shrinks during firing. You know? And so what happens is, I use it because it has a nice crackle. It's actually a Randy Johnson recipe, and I also had to show him last night my recipe on his recipe on my pots. So if you didn't really recognize it, it might really good. So you know, I call it the RJB. So what happens in firing, I found after trying to go back and with an X-Acto knife and try to cut that slip out of those areas that didn't resist or come off, it actually shrinks enough to reveal that line, just enough. And so, in a tradition, like in a more straightforward way of decorating pots, would just slip on a pot and pot salt glazing it. Sometimes it's very thin lines just kind of get blown out or obliterated with salt. So it's a nice built-in factor to have, you know, the thin lines and the fact that the slip shrinks a little bit away. Sometimes it doesn't work as nicely. I penciled the pattern sort of mapping out to help. I'm not very confident with just freehanding it. I want to make sure there's enough room on the pot for everything I want. You know, it just gives me a kind of warm-up thing. It's like a dog circling around a pillow, you know. It's a habit. It's a habit. There's no explanation. It's just a habit I do that makes me feel comfortable, warms me up. Sometimes I'll be more improvisation. So you can see if I had a real rough surface, it would just be bumping along there, and it wouldn't be as enjoyable to me.
I'm doing the one with your patterns, and just paint them out.
I sort of fill it all in. I fill all the space in until I feel like it's done. Some people have, you know, told me about this psychological condition that it's like a Latin ore baculum, where it's like you feel like a lot of folk artists and people who do like in the South, these paintings are filled with things like dots, Aboriginal paintings, like this, the whole thing is filled. And you know, and when it's at that point that I feel like that's enough. I want every mark to be distinct, but I want it to be all in there. If I leave a pot like that, I don't feel comfortable leaving it that way. But I do leave pots sometimes just to test myself, just to push myself in a direction. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but I was like, okay, I'm just going to leave that pot, show some strength, see what happens, and it's fine. And I was just looking at an image for my slide talk tomorrow. It's like, wow, I did this, it was like this. It was just no leaves. It was just this line, which is really nice by itself. I feel compelled, I guess, to fill it in. So,
Do you look at them at any specific distance or on a table or anything like that to see whether or not you think they're full? Or
usually right here is where I work, you know, but it's an interesting question because I think that taking pictures of my work every day when I'm in the studio for my blog or whatever, and looking at them through that lens or looking at them on the screen really changed my perception of the box. I see things that I'll see when I'm working on the pot, or if after the fire, I like to see a crack. Because you see you see things really differently too, on the screen. I'm gonna wash this out because I don't want it to dry.
So now that this wax is dried over the flowers here, I want to take all the rest of that white away. And I used to squeak and squirt for ages until my hand got tired, and then I found that if I just give it another bath, that glaze will start to release and the wax is good enough to hold on to it. So just loosening up that glaze, and then you bring it back to the batting wheel here and this work going. Right off. So there's that articulated flower.
Have you ever done any of this, like starting with the silk layer and doing something build up and then this and then move on to the glaze build up?
Right, yeah. With the black, I've been doing that. Yeah, so that same process on leather hard, painting a flower, and then in the black trace it, and then it's a negative flower. And then what's been fun about that is then offsetting the flower on top of that.
Yeah.
So it looks like it's kind of moved away from itself or left the flower.
I have a question for both of you. What makes your particular pot successful in your eyes? Or like what qualities do you look for in pots that you strive for every pot or something along those lines?
I like what thrills me is when the surface is and the clay, the glaze, and the slick, all that stuff kind of seems like it's one unit. It's not like you can't tell, you can't pick apart how it's painted, or I can sort of see that plate had a nice surfaces going around. And some pots, maybe one or two pots out of the kiln are like really like zingers, and I really want to keep them. So I like give my daughters a pot from every fire, and I'm hoping to get the same pot I like. So, but it's generally like, and I use some local materials, and it's hard to integrate that with commercial materials. And so all that stuff, if it all kind of melts together in a nice unity, I guess is the word.
Harmony is the word that's been coming to mind for me more often.
Yeah, it's not a rule that it has to be like super melted hot, but just the colors, the pot shape, the feeling, after it's been sanded, I sand all my pots, so it's how it feels in my hand, how it fits in my hand, or it's unexplainable. Unexplainable, unfinishable sentence.
My favorite parts of my work lately are the white space. It's like where there's nothing happening, hoping that it's the balance of like the cacophony of what's happening over here that makes that like an actual space of peace. I'm trying to get at the character like secretly, like this is funny for me because like I want to make white pots all of a sudden. Which I feel like takes a lot of courage, and like I don't feel like I'm terribly strong on form, and like making myself just keep it all white would really love that. Like my favorite, like where this whole aesthetic comes from originally for me is the Tang Dynasty pots, the sort of eggs and spinach, the Sansai ware, the 3-color stuff, and the volume in that jar is caught me, and then all that fun melty color. But I was just at the MIA a couple of days ago, and there's that same full volume jar, Tang Dynasty, just as old, but just left white. There's something about the character of that pot that I think like that's where I'm going. So at the moment, it's like what I'm searching for inside of the work is the white space.
normal in this shape, and I don't feel like I have that confidence, but I really work hard when I'm going to make it a really good shape, a good form. Is a lot to do. So I want to figure out what we're doing on the surface, because we're really taking the same thing. We don't have to curve It's ironic. Anyway, we have a monochrome. I'm a simple man. I have, not funny stories, but I'll speak this way. I recently redid my showroom in my studio, which I have visitors to visit my showroom, and I had white walls, and everything's white. My pots are sort of gray. My friend consulted me and said, "You need some color in here," so he gave me some color tips. I went to the store and got it for like sort of a reddish, not quite darker than your shirt, like a wine color, maybe red, more red, and green. Oh my gosh, Christmas almost. It's sort of, and so I painted the walls, and I realized I am not comfortable with the color so much. I felt really anxious and like worried about it. I couldn't sleep. Like, it's the wrong color. What do you do? Walk away. I realized it's really gravitated toward this kind of palette of gray and black and white. I'm trying. There's a few pots in the show. The last firing I did a lot more glazed pots, but
How about your colors?
This is the Tang Dynasty, and everything that came from it. So that's Silk Road trading routes, all went into Persia and Syria, to Italy, like all the way to Mexico. I think it's like it was so appealing to me. There's a beauty when I first saw those Tang Dynasty things, and then to like trace the ceramic history route and see that like it's an almost universally appealing sense of beauty, kind of bolstered my confidence, and yeah, this is something to explore. And then it's nice, I've been using this palette for more than 10 years now, and so to have that constant of color, familiarity with the materials, then it just leaves a whole kind of universe of exploration to play with. I haven't tired of it yet, except the notion of going white for a little while. I went white. It was Delft mode, English, London Delft. There were just, image after image of blue and white painted things, and then this one bumpy mode that was left white with just that tin glaze. And I made a series of that for the last show that I made, and it's where I wanted to hang out. I got to look at the pots and see that, like, over time, not a natural potter, the pots have been getting better. So that's each flower is made up of those three colors. And eventually that would be articulated with black. This black has been set to dry, and I'm going to go around. Well, there is no seam in my chest. I'm sorry, I'll try to keep that wheel spinning so you see how it develops.
Stephen, is the inclination to go white, is that have anything to do with, like, do you feel like you're suffering fatigue from decoration, or from, like, aesthetics of decoration, or the process?
It's the end result that I'm interested in. Like, I love doing this, and I feel like I'll often lose the painting by doing too much, and that's why, the spots that are left that, are that place of rest, the piece, that's been the most appealing thing. I still love doing this, and I miss it so much, but I've been trying to hold back and do less not for any sense of efficiency. I'll never be an efficient worker, really. It's not part of my makeup. But so that end result is, like, that's what I'm interested in, is having white pots made, maybe less so in making white pots.
You both are doing nature in terms of, you've got flowers and leaves, and you've got flowers over here.
My flowers aren't nature. My flowers are, they're, you know, like the grip tape that's in a bathtub so you don't slip. Those were they were light blue on my grandmother's pink refrigerator. So yeah, it has nothing to do with the lilies of the field or anything. It's my grandmother's kitchen, which is where I learned to cook. She was the best cook ever. So my heart is in that kitchen.
Any trouble with these little ridges? I know otherwise I'm trying to do a border around this pot. This is kind of a fun thing to do. Use service. But I appreciate the person who made this pot. This is thank you. I'm trying to get this sort of nice even rhythm going with my brush stroke. And kind of get through that stop. So it's like I guess a lot of my patterns, it's about rhythm more than nature. Like that's where you see rhythm. I can't sound it out. I just think it's a visual representation of rhythm, I guess, which I really like.
So you vary your music then to get different rhythms?
I do listen to a lot of music in the studio. You can go online and find out what music too. Taylor Swift. That's my daughter's run, but this is not working as much.
Yeah.
So this is what I mean by the time that I do that final coat of clear glaze on there, the pot's been so saturated that it's really just a very little bit of glaze, just enough so that it doesn't look like bisqueware. And then it kilns. I kept pushing my firing temperature up so that the clay itself got fairly tight. So it wasn't too leaky. Really, you can get away with just a little bit of glaze.
Is the inside first?
No, of course that would happen first. I just didn't do it because it requires wax protection. I decided it needs doing. Throw a little glaze in there later. But this move that I'm pretty into, you know, getting that yellow on top of that clear glaze once it's all really saturated. And again, putting it on and taking it off, it's just almost completely goes away. Like it's much more red than it will be yellow later on. It's like a stain, sort of into stains. And that's it. Like I like the old pots so much when they've been through a bunch of hands and through a bunch of grease and all that stuff. So I'm trying to get that activity to happen. I'm pretty broken in, at least aesthetically, before as they come out of the kiln brand new, they look like they've been around for a while.
If this was successful, the edge of this brush tip, I'm not really looking at the actual mark with the brush mark, but I'm looking at the space in between, equally sharp, crisp, almost like an edge of a leaf, you know, that sort of soft edge, which I'm having trouble getting with the wax, just the combination of all these things. But I'm really loving this sort of pattern around the tip and the border. And I just simply do another scroll inside of here. Which is very, I guess it's really for scrolling, I found it's really, I can turn the, actually turn the whole handle and the brush is sort of following this nice smooth line. I thought it was interesting. I taught Kit O'Connell, he was talking about using the banding wheel as she's making a line, so the line doesn't move in a funny way, like it just uses this kind of motion.
Is that a modified brush, or did you make it?
I made this. It's a piece of bamboo that's got it's like a deer hair or some sort of, in the fly fishing store, you get like hide that's already attached to the, it's still attached to the hide. The hair, the coat is still attached to the hide. And you, it's pretty simply made. You grab the hair and you tie it with some polyester thread and tie it nice and tight, and then you cut the hide. So it's, yeah, it's really nice, but it makes a very specific kind of line.